What do you need to create a basic video for learning Biblical Greek? Well, in this video, I'm going to take you through the very basics you'll need to have if you're going to go from zero all the way through to reading Greek. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Master New Testament Greek show. Do you think I should call it a show? Maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. I don't know. Let me know in the comment section below. In this video, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the key books you need to build an essential library if you're going to learn to read the New Testament in Biblical Greek. Now, this is not a complete list of every possible book you could get, nor is it necessarily a list of the books that I always recommend you get. This is really just a bare minimum basic set of books that you're going to need if you're going to go from zero all the way through to reading the New Testament in Greek fluently. So, with that, there's going to be a number of categories of books that we're going to have to use. And the first category, of course, is you're going to need some beginning Greek grammars. And I say grammars on purpose, more than one. I'll talk about that in just a moment. Once you're through beginning Greek, you're also going to need an intermediate Greek grammar. In fact, again, I recommend two, and I'll explain why in just a moment. You're also going to need some vocabulary guides, something to help you with vocabulary. You're going to need something to help you with text criticism. You're going to need something to help you with morphology and some other general elements of Greek that are either not well covered in grammars or are inconsistently covered in grammars, and maybe you want a bit more depth on them. I think you're also going to need at least two Greek New Testaments, and there's one other book that I'm going to encourage you to get as well. So those are the categories that we're going to use to guide the filling out of this Greek library. Okay, let's get into the first section, which is with beginning Greek grammars. For beginning Greek grammars, I have two right now that I recommend, and there are always beginning Greek grammars coming out. In fact, as I write this, it's just, I think, 2 days after when Rob Plummer's Beginning with New Testament Greek, which he co-wrote with Dr. Burer, came out. And so I haven't looked at that grammar yet. That may make it into this, but I don't have it right now. So this, maybe you want to get that in addition to this. I don't know. These are the two Greek grammars that I'm recommending right now. And, well, let me just introduce them to you. The first one is Rod Decker's Reading Koine Greek. Now, this is a bigger grammar. You can see it's a little bit more solid. One of the other things about this, too, is it's a little more consistent and up-to-date in a number of ways. I've done a review of this Greek grammar previously. I'll leave a link to that just up here so you can go look at that. But I recommend this as a really good beginning Greek grammar. Now, one other one that comes with that, and that is Bill Mounce's Basics of Biblical Greek. Now, this is in its 4th edition. I haven't done a full review of this yet, but I have done a couple of videos where I've talked about some of the things in this. So I'll leave a link to at least one of those up here for you so you can go find that as well. These two grammars are very different, and that's why I recommend both of them. What I tend to find is that people who benefit from this one will then take some of the concepts in here, which will then augment what's in this one. Similarly, if you just start with this one, it's not going to have some of the things that you're going to find in here. So these are very complementary. I like Mounce because it's very clear on what you need to know. I think that's one of the great strengths of it. But there are some weaknesses. I think around verbal aspect is a weakness of this text. On the other hand, Rodney Decker's is very good when it comes to that stuff, but he's not so good on morphology, which is, again, what you get a very strong dosage of in Mounce. And so I think these two grammars together are really, really good. On one hand, you get to know exactly what you need to learn. On the other hand, you fill in the gaps of the things that aren't covered very well in Mounce. So those are my two beginning Greek grammars that I recommend. Mounce and Decker. Hey, are you getting value from this video? If you are, please hit the like button, and if you haven't already done so, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so that you know when new videos are released. That will be really helpful for me and for the algorithm and helps other people find this video. Thanks very much. So what about intermediate Greek grammars? Well, here again, I have two that I recommend. And again, there are other options that you might prefer, and I'd be interested to know what you would prefer. But let me give you the two that I currently recommend, and then I'll explain why. On the first hand, I really, really like David Mathewson's Intermediate Greek Grammar. This is short, concise, up-to-date, and just really good for giving you a really solid grasp of the grammar without getting bogged down in categories and lexical all these kind of things, right? This is just a really refreshing grammar that's designed to help you understand how the language works really in an organic kind of way, which I think is really, really good. Let me show you the foil for that, and that is, of course, Dan Wallace's Greek Grammar Beyond the Basics. This is a classic grammar now, and I'm really including this in some ways because it's hard to go past it if you're looking for something a little bit more comprehensive. Now you can see this is a thicker grammar, and I haven't done a review actually of either of these. I have recommended this one in the past, but I haven't done a good review of either of these, so I'll add that to my list. The thing with this though is that this is, shall we say, a little less nuanced in a number of ways. For instance, you talk about actionsart in this Greek grammar, and you ask it for a definition of actionsart, and you're going to be left wondering, well, what's the difference between actionsart and aspect? It just isn't that clear, and it's kind of a product of its time. It was written in the late 1980s, early 1990s, published in, I think, 1990 or 91, somewhere around there. It's very good, though, for a comprehensive understanding of a number of areas of the grammar. Like, for instance, if you want to look at, how all the different uses of the genitive, well, this is your go-to book. Now, people argue that he slices and dices it too much, which is one of the things overcome in this. This simplifies that. But nonetheless, this has a really solid approach, a very comprehensive approach to Greek grammar in general. There's a couple of shortcomings in this. It's not very strong on adverbs. And like I mentioned, it's not that good with some of the more recent discussions around verbal aspect and actionsart for that matter as well, and a number of things like that. So this really needs something a bit more up to date. This, I think, is a good balance. Now, you might be saying to me, well, what about going deeper with New Testament Greek? Well, I have that on my shelf right here. And this is a great grammar in some ways, but in a lot of ways it sits cleanly in between these two grammars. And so if it sits so cleanly in between them, I think you'll be better served with two that are quite different than one that kind of sits in between them. Now, if you only had to buy one Greek grammar, I would probably recommend this one. But that's just me. I'd be interested in your feedback in the comment section below. The third category I want to address is Greek New Testaments. You are going to need a Greek New Testament. And my recommendation, if you make it your goal to read the New Testament in biblical Greek, you probably aren't going to want to have a reader's edition long term. Short term, a reader's edition will be really helpful, but long term, you're probably just going to use it for a year or two and then never pick it up again. I don't know if that's a great investment. Maybe it is, but we're looking at an essential library here. So here's my recommendation. You're going to need a Greek New Testament that you can just read from. And I recommend for that a Tyndale Greek New Testament. This is just a really good, solid Greek New Testament, very readable, easy to take notes, lots of space in it. And it's got nice paper, so it's going to last you a long time. That's one of the things I love about this, and I did a review of this recently, and you can see a link to that just up here. The other Greek New Testament you're going to need is a critical edition, and so I recommend the UBS, Universal Bible Society's Greek New Testament. The reason for that is down the bottom here, it gives you basically the most important text witnesses to the text, along with a rating as to the reading that's in the main text, so that you know roughly how solid the choice that the critical edition has made is. Now, this is a great complement to the Greek New Testament from Tyndale House, but they're very different beasts, and you really want something that's going to give you at least some modicum of information about text criticism and some of the manuscripts, and this is a great text for that. If you wanted to go deeper into textual criticism, then you'd probably rather go for an NA28, which doesn't have that rating, but it still has all those notes and more at the bottom of the page. And so either of those would be good. I would tend to go with the UBS because it simplifies it just a little bit. Now, since I said you don't want to get a reader's edition, you're probably wondering, well, how am I going to learn the vocabulary? Well, there are two books that I recommend for this. The first one, of course, is Master New Testament Greek, which is my own work. And the reason I recommend this is because it's going to give you all the vocabulary for the entire Greek New Testament, ordered from the easiest books all the way through to the hardest. And it's going to help you to learn every single word. Now, I did a review of this system a little while ago, and you can find a link to that up here as well. The other book, if you wanted something short term to bridge the gap, so between the time you get your regular Greek New Testament and you no longer need a reader's edition, this would be the volume to get, a New Reader's Lexicon of the Greek New Testament. This is ordered canonically, so it kind of fits the bill of a reader's edition, but it's going to force you to go look it up in a book. What this means is that even when you are finished with your New Testament, like reading through it, or maybe you never get to that, you've still got a work that you can just look up a book, chapter, and verse, and you can see all the words that occur, I think it's 30 times or more, maybe it's 50 or less rather, in that text, and you can look it up in here and see exactly what it means without having to go looking through alphabetically to see what the words are. This is a really good compromise between a reader's edition and not having a reader's edition, and that's really the recommendation I give you. And the reason for that too is that really the more you have to look it up, the less inclined you're going to be, and the more you're going to want to learn the words, which then becomes a forcing function for actually memorizing the vocabulary, which is what Master New Testament Greek is really all about. So, vocabulary, I recommend Master New Testament Greek and a New Reader's Lexicon. Now, when it comes to text criticism, I just mentioned talking about in the Greek New Testament, there are some critical editions that have got text critical notes at the bottom. You're going to need to have some understanding of what those text critical notes are at some stage along the way. And if you do, then you probably want to get a copy of something like an Introduction to the Greek New Testament. This is produced by the same people who produced the Tyndale House Greek New Testament, and it gives you really more of an approach to how they did it, but at the same time it gives you an overview of the whole process, which is kind of handy. Another option is that you go and get David Allen Black's very short, in fact shorter than this, Introduction to Text Criticism, which is this volume here. That volume is 60, 70 pages, is even shorter, but it's agnostic to the text edition of the text that it's working with, and that may give you another good option as well. But either of those are good just to give you a bit of a flavor for what text criticism is and how it works. And isn't it great that these are just such short books with such easy text to read? That's really nice. There are two more books that I recommend that you get for your library that I haven't talked about yet and that don't really fit in another one of the categories. The first one is A Morphology of Biblical Greek by Bill Mounce. Now, this is the same Bill Mounce who did the basics of Biblical Greek that we talked about before, the basic Greek grammar. This is a really good guide to understanding how words change from one instance to another based on things like spelling, different tense forms, and so on and so forth. So if you're interested in why certain words look the way they do, you can come in here. You can look up the exact words you want in the back, and then you can go look at the page number, or at least the reference here, and find that word, and then look at the variations of it, why it does what it does, and so on and so forth. Now again, I've done a video explaining how to use this, and you'll find a link to that just up here as well. But I strongly recommend this because you're going to come across forms in your Greek New Testament that even though you have learnt the words, you're going to be confused as to why did this word do that. This book will help you answer that question. And so this is a really helpful book. Another one I think is critical is really The Basics of Verbal Aspect by Constantine Campbell, this one here. And the reason this one is so important is because when you go through things like, the Intermediate Greek grammar, these kinds of books are going to refer to verbal aspect. And they're going to refer to actensar, and they're going to help you to sort of understand what they are. And again, Mathewson leans on this book, by Campbell, to help you understand what verbal aspect is and so on. He takes a slightly different view to Campbell's, but Campbell's breaks the whole verbal aspect idea down and helps you to understand it. And again, if you're interested in more information about this book, you'll find more information about that in the card that I leave up here as well. I've done a review of this book in the past. So I think this is a really helpful book, and when students read this, lights come on about how the language is actually working, and that makes the language more alive and easier to understand and follow and know how the text is working. Now, for what it's worth, this Intermediate Greek Grammar by David Mathewson and this Beginning Greek Grammar by Decker, these both really lean on verbal aspect in much the same way. And so this book by Constantine Campbell really will provide a solid complement to these volumes, so that really by the time you finish going through Beginning Greek, Intermediate Greek, and then you've read the basics of verbal aspect, you will have a really solid understanding of how verbal aspect works, why it's important, how to understand the verbs in their context, and so on. So I can't recommend this highly enough. This is a great book, and you really ought to have that in your library as well. One last book that I really want to encourage you to get to complete, well, not really complete, because this is a basic library. You can't complete a basic library. You expand a basic library, but you don't complete a basic library. But I think this book here, Greek for Life by Rob Plummer and Benjamin Merkel, is also well worth having, because there are going to be times in the process of trying to learn Greek where you're going to want to give up. And this book has got lots of little helpful tools to help you review, to revise, to refresh and revive, so that you can continue learning biblical Greek for the long term. So I recommend Greek for Life by Ben Merkel and Rob Plummer. This is a great book, and you really ought to read this. And while you're going through the reading Greek process, the learning Greek process all the way through, even consider reading this once a year just to refresh you and keep you motivated. I think this is a really good book to help you with that as well. Now, we haven't covered a number of things. You might be thinking, well, what about the Septuagint? What about the Apostolic Fathers? Well, I would love to continue to give you lots of other books, and I will in time do that. But this video is all about a basic Greek library, and I'm assuming that your focus is in the New Testament, and therefore things like the Septuagint and Apostolic Fathers will come a little bit later on. You don't need to delve too much into those things for the sake of New Testament Greek, although they will certainly help as you get further down the track. But let me ask you, are there any books in the list that I've just given you that you would change, or that you think I should include, that should be in everybody's basic library? Leave a note in the comment section below. Let me know. Maybe I missed it and maybe you'll help me fill it in, or maybe, just maybe, there's something you know about that I don't know about that I can learn from you as well. But leave a note in the comment section below. Let me know what books you would add or encourage people to have for a basic library. I'd love to hear about that as well. And if you haven't already done so, go to masterntgreek.com/roadmap, download my roadmap to mastery today, so that you can see how you can go from where you are all the way through to reading the New Testament fluently. It's not out of reach. Everyday people are doing it, and I want to encourage you to do it too. So keep taking small, consistent steps toward mastery. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. We'll see you then.